recruits and money, and that further attacks put those at risk. Joining us now in London to talk more about all of this is Baria Al-Mudin of the Arab daily newspaper Al-Hayat, and Ayad Abu Chakra, journalist for the Saudi newspaper Asharq Al-Awsat. Thank you both for being with us. Baria Al-Mudin, let me ask you, first of all, what you have been seeing in the Arab press and on television, because the people we have monitoring here say there's the suggestion that Al-Qaeda may not have been to blame, that people are eager to find other individuals or organizations who may have been responsible. What have you seen?
Well, allow me to disagree with that, actually. Everybody thinks and believes it's Al-Qaeda, and indeed Al-Qaeda, as you mentioned at the beginning, that's called Al-Majalla. It's a magazine that's published by Asharq Al-Awsat group in an email, and they have emailed this magazine before. They actually did say that they did the bombing, and they even say why they did it. So no, it is Al-Qaeda, and I think you will find that the majority of people, the writers, the columnists, the commentators, everybody is condemning this attack. Everybody is, I think, finally seeing Al-Qaeda for what it is. It is a terrorist organization, if you like. It's a cult in a way. It is not an organization in the sense that it has followers. It's just that people follow the idea. But I think now everybody is realizing that this is definitely terrorism as it's read. It has nothing to do with jihad. It has nothing to do with Islam, definitely.
Ayad Abu Chakra, I'd like to ask you about that, because if this is the new opinion of Al-Qaeda, what was the previous opinion, the opinion before this weekend? Was there a tendency even in Saudi Arabia for many people to be soft on Al-Qaeda or supportive of it?
Well, Jonathan, there is a sense of frustration throughout the Arab and Muslim world, because Al-Qaeda has been winning supporters, if we can say that, by default. They have been benefiting from the mistakes of American administration policies. Al-Qaeda had nothing to offer, positive to offer to the Muslim masses, and every sane Muslim realizes this. The problem is that allowing such organizations to win by default is really tragic, and this is very frustrating to the young Muslim and Arab men and women.
And what has changed because of this attack? We heard Brent Sadler talking about a family in Beirut that was horrified and convinced that Al-Qaeda had targeted civilians intentionally. Do either of you get a sense that that has crossed some kind of line definitively?
Oh, definitely. I think you're right. If I may say, one of the employees in my brother's organization, Fortune Promo 7, he was severely injured. He was in a coma. He just is in intensive care. He lost his child, 4 years old, and his son, 6 years old. His wife lost a baby, and they had to amputate her leg. So in a sense, this time is completely different because it is touching many, many Arab lives and many Arab families. And I think, as I said before, Jonathan, I think people are starting to realize that this is not a way, some people are saying, well, they want to reach some political means and some political, hopes in the kingdom or other places in the Arab world. Many people also don't think that this is the way. Many people see actually that there is a move in Saudi Arabia towards democratization, towards some sort of a state for the people. It is coming maybe slowly, but it's certainly seen. So people are asking themselves, why are they targeting these innocent people? Be it Americans, be it Lebanese, being any other nationality. Because in that compound, as you said, there were Lebanese, there were Jordanians, and there were Palestinians, and middle class, working people, innocent people that have nothing to do with politics, have nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. And I actually heard on many, many stations, on many television screens, people asking this question: what do Al-Qaeda really want? Is it terror for terror's sake?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Forgive me for interrupting. I want to jump in and put this similar question to you, Ayad Abu Chakra, because it makes me wonder if somehow innocent Lebanese are, to many Arab minds, more innocent than innocent Americans or innocent Australians or innocent Britons.
I think every innocent soul is innocent, Jonathan. And I'm very glad that Baria put it in a very simple way. Now it has brought this tragedy to every household throughout the Middle East, And now the Lebanese feel the same way as Americans felt on September 11th. Every innocent life is an innocent life. We are not going to differentiate between one life and another. And I think it is very right to say that Al-Qaeda does not have a monopoly on Islam. You cannot, the Islamic brand of Al-Qaeda is very, very confused, and most of the Muslims don't accept it as the set definition of Islamic political thought.
Now,
Jonathan, if I may say, this has started before this bombing. You remember the last bombing in Riyadh as well. There were many Saudis that were killed in that bombing and maimed and injured. So this has not started only this bombing, it has started before.
what do you think has changed within Al-Qaeda? Do you think they simply chose this time the wrong compound by mistake, last time also maybe the wrong compound by mistake, or are they now giving up even the distinction that seemed important before between Muslim and non-Muslim, Arab and non-Arab?
I think they're confused. I think they're totally confused, if you ask me, because sometimes we hear that they are, you know, it's a soft target, and then they say, no, we intended to do it, and then they say, no, we didn't want to do it, it was a mistake, we intended the American. And if I may say, an innocent soul is innocent if it's American or Lebanese or anything. This is why the majority of sane Arabs and Muslims around the world condemned 9/11. You were right, just to answer before, if Iyad wants to say.
Yes, I agree on that, absolutely. Yeah, and I think what this is bringing home to every one of us is that perhaps we don't know that much about Al-Qaeda. We have been dealing with it as newspaper people, media people, as if it is a cohesive, very well thought of, very well defined organization. Perhaps it is not, after all, such a very well organized organization. You have such a known goal scored in Riyadh and before it on several other occasions. Tell us a lot about how much we know about it. Perhaps we don't know that much.
Let me ask you a question, not about Al-Qaeda, but about the means Al-Qaeda takes, because other organizations that would describe themselves as liberation organizations also kill civilians. Are people likely to turn only against Al-Qaeda, or are they going to turn against the idea of terrorism in support of any goal, whatever it might be?
I think the question of, there was the problem that many Arab governments have had with the Bush administration is that the Bush administration forced a certain definition of terrorism. But I think killing innocent civilians, there is no disagreement on that. Any organization, be it secular, religious, quasi-religious, which is willing to attack innocent civilians is a terrorist organization. There is no doubt about it.
On that note, I'm afraid we're going to have to end this conversation, but Iyad Abu Chakra of Al-Sharq Al-Awsat and Baria Al-Mudin of Al-Hayat, we thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
We have to take another break. When we come back, tackling fundamentalism in the birthplace of Islam, what might be ahead for Saudi Arabia. Stay with us.
Shihab, and I said he was from Al Hayat. He was in fact from LBC, the Lebanese Broadcasting Corporation. We do have Baria Al-Mudin, who is from Al Hayat. She's joining us now. Baria, thanks so much for being with us. How, you've been talking to people, how is this playing out in the Arab world?
Michael, I must point out that this is a working day in the Arab world. So some people, it hasn't reached them yet, some people have. So probably won't be celebrations, you won't see celebrations in the street. But there is a great sense of relief. I'm personally delighted, I'm very happy for the Iraqis, for the Arabs, for humanity indeed, because Saddam Hussein, as we all know, has waged wars against his neighbors, against Iran, against his own people. There is a sense of good. We want justice done, and I hope justice will come swiftly and it will be seen as fair and revealing all the things we need to know. The Iraqis need to put an end to this chapter in their lives. and go on to a more peaceful one.
Well, what happens? What impact do you think there will be regionally, geopolitically, if you like, now that he's caught? Does it actually make a big difference?
Yes, I think in many ways it does, mostly psychological. I think many Iraqis, just before I came on set, I was speaking to somebody in the Arab world, and you know, and they said, maybe this is his double, maybe this is not Saddam Hussein. And I said, you be sure that the Americans would not have declared that if they haven't made absolutely sure. So there is this huge burden of, which would be, you know, relieve the Iraqi people and indeed the Arabs. I think on a regional level, many of the people will feel that now maybe Iraq will not threaten its you know, regional neighbors. Maybe Iraq now will be more of a partner than a threat. There was always this in the back mind of many neighbors of Iraq, that what is Saddam Hussein thinking? What is he going to do next? Don't forget, he invaded Kuwait and threatened Saudi Arabia. And so there is this relief. On another scale, I think it must be seen as a relief for the people, in the sense that, you know, telling, you know, governments and leaders that, you know, there will be checked by the people, and I think not only in Iraq, in the region indeed, but also around the world. I think people like Mugabe should be thinking that justice will come later maybe, but it will come.
Tell me this, there are many people in Iraq who do not like Saddam Hussein, despise him, but are still opposed to having foreign troops on Iraqi soil. Is the capture of Saddam Hussein presumably isn't going to make that resentment go away?
Well, let me tell you something. I think if Saddam Hussein had been caught before, you know, just as the war ended months before, I think he would have gotten a much better reaction. It's unfortunate that the coalition forces did not get their act together previously, meaning in the first few months, this last 6 months, we've been seeing that the peace after the war has not been planned carefully. Maybe now there are lessons that have been learned. Maybe there will be a period where people will start believing and seeing that the coalition forces are there for the peace, not for their own benefit, and they will be seen as liberators more than people who are invaders. Also, I think it will depend on how the American forces indeed behave with the nationals, with the Iraqis. They are seen to be more fair. They're seen to be more considerate of the cultural values, the cultural customs, and so hence a new chapter will be opened between the coalition forces and the Iraqi people, and hopefully the Arabs at large.
All right, we'll leave it there for the moment. Hopefully get back to you, Baria Alamuddin, joining us there from London. I want to go back to Jane Araf. She's standing by, our Baghdad bureau chief. She is in Baghdad. Jane, you have a guess?
This is the end of dictatorship in the Middle East.
We're still hearing
Justice he denied to millions.
But how? The U.S. hasn't yet said whether it'll hand Saddam over to the Iraqis for trial. The Iraqi Council wants to put him before the war crimes tribunal they set up last week. Execution, the ultimate penalty. Experts in international law believe that Saddam Hussein can be charged with crimes against humanity and even genocide for unleashing chemical weapons against Kurds and Iranians more than 20 years ago. Members of the governing council said they had met Saddam after his capture, verified his identity, and even spoken to him.
If there's any signal or message from that criminal, ugly criminal, that he was not remorseful whatsoever for any crime he had committed against the Iraqi people, not mass graves, no, not the wars that he waged against Iran, not even the invasion of Kuwait.
Adnan Pachachi said Saddam was defiant and even tried to justify these things, calling himself a just but firm ruler. Pachachi called this a sick mind. Experts say it's important for the historical record and for future reconciliation that he account for his crimes before the Iraqi people, unlike former dictators like Yugoslavia's Slobodan Milosevic, who is currently on trial at the International War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague. The Iraqi Governing Council says any trial of Saddam Hussein would be civilian, not military, that it would be open to the media and public, and that the defendant would have a lawyer. A fair trial would be important for world opinion, especially in the Arab world.
I'm sure people in the region, at the world at large, are thinking that brutal leaders cannot go on surviving. You can run, you cannot hide, you will be captured. So there is a lesson, a moral lesson to be learned there.
Human rights organizations point out that under Saddam Hussein's dictatorship, the Iraqi justice system had no experience with proper trials, much less with the complex procedures that govern the prosecution of war crimes. Christiana Manpour, CNN, London.
And the news continues.
Battle for confidence in Iraq. How were the pictures taken after Saddam's capture interpreted by the world's media? And later, the murder trial that shocked the world. The British media draws criticism over its coverage of the Soham murders. And we begin this week with the capture of Saddam Hussein. Weekends are traditionally quiet periods for the world's newsrooms. But anyone who was on duty last weekend will always remember the moment these pictures came in from a coalition briefing in Baghdad, showing for the first time a disheveled and defeated Saddam, president since 1979 and now captured without a shot fired. The only moment at which the Bush administration appeared to celebrate came right at the beginning.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Only several days later did the president get close to describing what many of Saddam Hussein's opponents now want to see happen.
I think he ought to receive the ultimate penalty. And for what he's done to his people, I mean, this is a disgusting tyrant who deserves justice, the ultimate justice. But that will be decided not by the President of the United States, but by the citizens of Iraq in one form or another. There needs to be a process that is transparent and open. We'll be working with the Iraqis to develop a system that people will say it's open and it's fair.
Western media are largely celebrating the arrest, with some leaning towards openly humiliating Saddam Hussein. Arab media arguably showed a broader range of opinions. The Iraqi daily Al Zaman said the capture of Saddam is another window of hope for a clean Iraq, swimming in sunshine and far away from a dark past crowded by the dungeons of the Secret Service. Al-Ta'aki, linked to the Kurdish Democratic Party, says the time has come to control emotions and return to tranquility, logic, and contemplation. The Palestinian daily Al-Quds says the saddest and most disgraceful thing is that toppling the regime was carried out by the occupation forces. And in London, the daily Al-Hayat's deputy editor wrote, a corpse would have been pardoned for his deeds, but it would at least have helped claim that he paid the price. Joining me now are the foreign editor of Al-Hayat, Baria Al-Mudin, and from Washington, Newsweek correspondent Mark Hosenball. Mark, let me begin with you. We heard President Bush say to his staffers on the news at the capture that he wanted the White House to be what he said would be a, quote, no-gloat zone. Was he successful?
I guess not entirely. I mean, they seem to be pretty cock-a-hoop about this development, and you know, the pictures are playing again and again and again. This is the picture, certainly the picture of the year, maybe the picture of the decade, even though the decade is not very long gone. And you know, they're playing it for what it's worth. They're enjoying it, you know, and it's also, of course, an election season just beginning here in Washington, and these are good pictures for Bush's re-election.
I want to come back to the theme of election in a minute, but first, Barry, I want to ask you. We saw in the aftermath of the deaths of Saddam's sons, Uday and Qusay, that there was widespread disbelief. Do you think this time the coalition has managed this news event, that there is now widespread acceptance that Saddam Hussein himself has in fact been captured?
Well, yes, I think it's much better, as you said, staged, and I think the Americans learned a lesson through that. But however, there are still people in the Arab world believing that Saddam is still alive, and this is just one of his doubles, and this is not actually true. But I would really say, stress, again, it's just a small minority that thinks so. Most people believe it is Saddam. Most people believe that the capture was right. Well, there are, you know, different reportings of the event, as you've seen. But in general, yes, there is more belief this time, thanks because the Americans said they did the DNA test, and so mostly, yeah, there is belief, I would say.
Mark, that in itself has to be seen as a victory both for the Pentagon, for the Coalition Provisional Authority, and for the Bush White House, that there was not this widespread skepticism of the possibility that this was or was not Saddam, that in fact they put it out there, it was accepted, and they got to move on.
I think that's right. I think that's why they did what they did. I mean, some people said that this was triumphalism, or this was insulting a prisoner of war or whatever, because apparently you're not supposed to insult prisoners of war. There was even a letter in the New York Times yesterday saying it was against medical ethics to show somebody examining, somebody in a medical examination. None of that really bothers me. I mean, if indeed it's going to convince Saddam that he's been captured, if it's going to convince the Iraqi people in the world that he's been captured, then what's wrong with it? He sure as hell looked like Saddam to me, and his mannerisms were, Saddam-like. He looked like the same guy, except for the beard that we had seen gloating or smirking behind the table there with all his generals. And I think in this case it was completely appropriate to put out the video in the way that they did, even if it humiliated the guy. I mean, here's a guy who was a dictator, who humiliated his own people for years, who acted like the king of the world, and this demonstrated pretty clearly that the king has fallen.
There is this question of humiliation. They clearly were images which were meant to show him in a dramatically weakened position. But Beria, from the point of view of people in the Arab world, were they images that humiliated not only the man but the nation?
Well, yes, indeed. Arab culture is full of heroic stories, and for us, especially for men, heroism is a demand. It's the best quality in a man, indeed. Also, for somebody like Saddam, who was carrying guns and showing guns everywhere he went, who was, making himself looking like this very brave man all the time, while many people, of course, believed he was a coward, sending people to war, etc., while himself doing nothing. But in general, yes, there was this defeatism in the Arab world, and this is not something that is looked very favorably, especially coming from the American administration. This has nothing to do with loving Saddam or not loving Saddam. It's more to do with not loving the American administration and what the American administration stands for, and especially its policies in the area. So I would have preferred, just for that purpose, that things would have been dealt differently. And also some people saying this is, after all, was a president of a country. No matter what it is, he should have been treated in a much different way. There is this debate going on, yes, indeed. But I must say to my colleague, I think the picture of the century or the decade must be the capture of Bin Laden more than Saddam Hussein. I think he's the one we need to capture.
The picture we haven't yet seen yet,
yeah,
of course.
Well.
Mark, too, you raised the question of this being an election year. There's been, it would seem, just a very little bump up for President Bush in the polls with the capture of Saddam. Certainly the markets took it in their stride and then dropped back down again. The dollar didn't get any bump out of it. It just sort of seems that, and there's a long time between now and next November.
Well, that's entirely true. I mean, obviously, now that they have Saddam, they can continue to make a big deal out of his capture. They can draw out the issue of his interrogation, his capture, his alleged crimes, etc., for months and months and months, although they risk, if they overplay, the White House overplays the Saddam capture thing and overplays the Saddam evilness thing, making Americans bored about it. And in fact, I've been debating with some of my colleagues, both in the print and TV media in our conversations, how quickly is it that the public's going to become bored with it? The fact is, already in America, other news, such as the arrest of Michael Jackson and some court cases here involving the detainees, has bumped Saddam from the top of the news. So, there's a risk here of the Bush people kind of overdoing it, because the American public has a very short attention span. So we'll sort of see how it plays out.
But that, Beria, has to be the next question of what, now that they've got him alive, what do they do with him? How quickly do they put him on trial? Under what form do they put him on trial? How do they treat him between now and then?
Yes, absolutely. I agree very much with what my colleague was saying, and there are conspiracy theories in the Arab world going around. One of them is that he actually has been captured before. There was this theory going on around Kuwait, I understand, saying that when they showed the pictures of him being captured in that place, there were some dates on top of a tree, and this is not the season for dates, so he must have been captured before. So I don't know about that, but I think what they need to do is get him to trial as soon as they can. And I hope that this trial will be monitored internationally and is seen to be very transparent and very fair. Because again, we go back to the conspiracy theory. People are saying that maybe he will not be able to say what he wants about the involvement of the Americans and indeed the British in the Iran-Iraq war at the beginning. And maybe he will not be allowed to say all the secrets he knows about world leaders here and there. So I think also, I think he needs to be treated fairly. We are in an age and time where human rights must be and should be respected. Even the worst criminals, which I'm sure he is one of them, should be treated in a humane and fair way. And for the Iraqi people's sake, the quicker the better. You see, these people have suffered a lot under Saddam Hussein. And the quicker they get him out of their system, of their mind, and also for the insurgency, it's very important that this is seen to be done quickly, because people, until now, they still would probably believe that maybe he will run away or that he will come back. You still hear these stories. This is why when a newspaper published his picture in Iraq with Ahmed Shalabi the other day, all the editions went out of the market. People were buying at some ridiculous prices simply to prove to themselves that he was false, that yes, this is Saddam Hussein. He's
and a visiting fellow with the Heritage Foundation. Welcome to both of you. Niall, let me start with you. First of all, a region free of weapons of mass destruction, is this just pie in the sky?
I don't think it's pie in the sky. I think it's possible that we can achieve this in the coming years. But one thing's for certain, I think the regime change in Iraq has certainly focused minds across the region. We've seen the immediate effect of that in Tripoli. We now have Colonel Gaddafi, who was at one time one of the most dangerous figures in the world, now negotiating with Britain and America to end his own weapons of mass destruction program. So I think we are likely to see a trend in the Middle East for disarmament. But of course, the big two players, Syria and Iran, are going to cause many problems in the coming years. And so we have to enter into some very serious negotiations with both those regimes.
Barry, your thoughts? Is it possible?
Well, first let me say Merry Christmas and a very peaceful year to you and to all your viewers. It's interesting that the previous talker said that it's Iran and Syria. Yes, it is possible. I wonder why he didn't mention Israel, and Israel is known to have nuclear weapons and WMD weapons. It is possible only in one case, if the American administration is serious about forcing Israel to sign to all the treaties, and indeed Iran and Syria and all other nations in the area that have or might have these weapons, which I don't believe anybody else. I think the only suspects now are these three nations. But to be seen to be fair, by the Americans have to enforce it on all countries, not only Syria and Iran.
Niall, it's a good point. Israel has got to be part of the solution, right?
Well, I don't think it's a good point, actually. I don't think that Israel poses a threat to anyone in the Middle East, actually. And Israel is not a state sponsor of terrorism. It is not a rogue state. However, Syria and Iran are both state sponsors of international terror. They are both dangerous rogue regimes. You have to make a distinction between Israel, which is a functioning democracy, and the Iranian and Syrian governments.
But if we're looking at a changed world order of sorts prompted largely by Iraq, why does Israel need 200 nuclear warheads?
Well, I think that Israel is coming under tremendous threat all the time, actually. It is coming under terrific terrorist attacks all the time. I think that there are legitimate reasons why Israel has armed itself. I don't think there are legitimate reasons as to why Iran and Syria are seeking to develop weapons of mass destruction programs. These are both nations that are, in my opinion, extremely dangerous.
Faria, your thoughts? I think you wanted to get in there.
Yes, I do actually. I don't know, I think my colleague over there has forgotten that it's Israel that is waging wars on Syria, and has threatened Iran. And indeed today the papers are full of Israel threatening Iran and Iran threatening Syria. This is not conduit, and I'm not sure about terrorism in Israel. We all disagree on that, because some people believe that the Palestinians are simply defending themselves and their rights. They are being occupied by Israel. So we don't want to go into this debate. What we need in that area is an area free of WMDs, of nuclear weapons, and every single nation should follow that, including Israel. And I would say Israel should be first. Israel is the biggest power in that area militarily. We all know that. It had won every war against its neighbors. It has indeed used very dangerous weapons, napalm bombs in Lebanon, as I believe. So let's not go around the bush. And I think, to be fair, we all have to dismantle. Every nation in that area has to dismantle. It's not only Iran and Syria. Definitely Israel should be first.
Well, Niall, I mean, if the United States is serious about making the Middle East a nuclear-free area, an area free of weapons of mass destruction, isn't it up to the U.S. administration to start pressuring Israel now to let the inspectors go in?
Well, first of all, I should point out that suicide bombing is certainly not self-defense. That is terrorism. I would argue that the Bush administration is placing a lot of pressure on Israel at the moment to negotiate with the Palestinians in order to reach a peace settlement. I believe we'll see increasing levels of pressure from the Bush administration on Israel. However, I don't think Israel is the central issue here. I think the central issue is rogue regimes developing weapons of mass destruction, posing a major threat not only to the Middle East but to the Western world. This is the central issue here, certainly not Israel.
All right, Baria, let's talk about Syria and the decision taken in Tripoli. Puts Syria in a bit of a tight corner, doesn't it?
Well, certainly it focuses on Syria and Iran. I agree with that. But don't forget, we went to war in Iraq because we thought the Iraqi regime threatened the West and threatened the world. And so far we haven't found any WMDs. I wonder if we are going indeed to find any WMDs in Syria or Iran. So this is not an argument that is well taken in the area at all. We all know for sure that Israel has it. So why is Israel excluded from this argument? Why is always Israel is allowed to have what the others don't have? There is this feeling of not being fair in the system around the world. Here we have Libya that came out, which is very good, to be recommended and commended indeed. And hopefully Israel will follow suit first, and then Syria and Iran and whatever, any country around the world, not only that. But I want to point out something. People in the area always feel that Israel is treated in a way while the others are treated in another way. Israel is treated as a favorable nation by the American administration and by the West in general. And that's not very well taken, I must say.
Okay, Niall, why do you think that Colonel Gaddafi has done this?
Well, I think he wants to rehabilitate his monstrous regime. Of course, it remains to be seen as to whether he follows through on all of his promises. Also, I don't believe that US sanctions should be lifted until we see a different regime in power in Libya. This is a regime which continues to brutalize its own population, which continues to be involved in international terrorism. I think there are many important reasons why this Libyan regime should still be treated as a pariah state. This is certainly a step in the right direction, and certainly I think it does send a message to other rogue regimes to fall into line as well. However, I think it will be many more years before Libya should be welcomed fully back into the fold of the international community.
And Baria, do you think he was also terrified by what he saw in Iraq?
Yes, I'm sure he did. I'm sure the whole world has learned a lesson, more or less. And of course, America, you know, the United States is looked at as the biggest power in the world, the most mighty power in the world, and it can do more or less what it wants. We're seeing in the world a new way of looking at things, that might is right, that whatever you want to call any country, a rock state or whatever, and then you decide it has the WMDs, you go to war, you attack that country, and then whether you find these weapons or not is another story, another matter. This is not the way I hope the world will be, and this is not what we need in the area, specifically in the area, especially coming from the United States. Because what we need coming from the United States is more fairness. It needs to look at the issues in a fair way. Israel and the American administration is not gaining friends in the area, it's gaining enemies. And unless and until it is seen to be behaving in a fair way, then things are going to go worse. And let me say something. The war in Iraq and not finding WMDs has not gone badly, not only in the Arab countries or the Muslim countries, indeed in countries like Britain and the whole Western world. So we don't want to wage these wars before we are sure about anything. What is not true? I'm sorry.
The Iraq war was a great victory, not only for Britain and the United States, but it was a victory for the Iraqi people, who are now free and don't have to live under a brutal dictatorship.
Absolutely,
I
agree with you.
That is justification itself for the war.
But where are WMDs? Where are the WMDs?
I don't think the WMD Iraq debate, frankly, is actually relevant to this particular issue here. We are talking about the liberation of 25 million people here.
All right, well, let's move on a little bit because we're short on time. The questions about whether Iran received nuclear technology from Pakistani scientists is also added to the impetus that this issue is getting. I'd just like to get your thoughts on that very quickly, if I may, Baria.
Well, I tell you what, again, this is something that's been written about extensively today in the papers. Why is it when Iran gets help from Pakistan or Korea or whoever is talked about, so who helped Israel to get its program, its nuclear program, or WMDs? Why don't we see that this debate is in the papers all around the world? Why don't we see that the US has helped it, or any other nation? Why is it when Israel helps countries in Africa or another place around the world to get WMDs or other dangerous weapons is not talked about? You see, again, we come back to this debate where these countries, mostly Islamic countries, are seen to be treated in an unfair and unjust manner, while Israel can do whatever. Israel is always right.
This is becoming
and
very
the whole
tedious,
world is always wrong.
Now, your thoughts on whether...
This is the truth.
You're sounding like a stuck record, frankly, this obsession with Israel.
Okay, well,
really over the top.
Let's not get into
I'm sorry, this is what the issue is all about.
But Niall, I wanted to get your thoughts on whether the thing about Iran receiving nuclear technology from Pakistani scientists is going to take this issue forward and propel it forward across the region, or whether it's just going to be one of those issues that's talked about and that's the end of it.
I think it's very serious, actually. Iran's ties with a number of nuclear-armed states across the world, the transfer of nuclear technology. I think it's a very, very serious issue. One thing is for certain, I think that the Bush doctrine certainly is working in the world, and hopefully Iran will disarm peacefully. But the United States, of course, is always maintaining the threat of military force against rogue states, combined with diplomacy. It's certainly beginning to work with Libya. I hope that it will also work with Iran and Syria as well.
All right, we've got to leave it there. Niall Gardner and Baria Alamuddin, many thanks for joining us on Q&A.
Thank you.
And that...
Imagine a service so accessible and quick that all it asks of you is a gentle touch of a button. Now imagine a world full of information totally within your remote control. Read the latest news headlines. Check financial market results from around the world. Or access the latest sports results. All it takes is a gentle touch of a CNN text.
Global challenges, highlighting technologies, helping people. This week, marine medicine. Go on an underwater journey in search of cures to our deadliest diseases. Cybertracker. Follow in the footsteps of some of the world's most endangered species using a new high-tech tool. And Mini Earth. Take an inside tour of a small project with a big idea. Colonizing space. These are the global challenges. This Sunday, only on CNN.
في ظل تلك الموجة الهائلة من الهزائم والانكسارات التي خيمت على بلاد الضاد، يبقى وحده الإعلام العربي الذي نجح في اختراق حاجز الصمت المخيف وانتصر ربما لنفسه أولا، واستطاع أن يضع قدمه على السكة الدولية والصحيحة، وفرض نفسه كمنافس قوي وتحول إلى مصدر الخبر، ولم يعد مجرد متلق له من وكالات الأنباء العالمية. الإعلام العربي أصبح رقما لا يستهان به على الخريطة الدولية، ويعود الفضل في ذلك أولا وأخيرا إلى قدرات فردية إعلامية كان له الدور السباق في هذه الثورة التي تحولت إلى ثروة عربية. حول الإعلام العربي، قدراته ومدى تأثيراته على الغرب، معنا في لقاء اليوم السياسي، الصحفية والكاتبة السيدة بارعة مكناس. مرحبا فيك سيدة بارعة باللقاء السياسي. يعني بالبداية بالطبيعة يعني بطاقة هوية لحضرتك، من هي بارعة مكناس الصحفية والكاتبة؟
أول شيء نزلتي من اسمي اسم مهم وهلأ جوزي بيزعل. أنا بارعة مكناس علم الدين. أوكي، الهوية مختصرة جدا. بلشت الحقيقة صحافي، درست صحافي وسياسي بلبنان، وبعدين اشتغلت بمجلة الصياد اللي هي كانت الدار الكبيرة، وبعدها طبعا اللي هي بتحتوي على الأنوار وغيرها. وبعدين انتقلت اشتغلت فترة بمجلة الحوادث، وبعدين أسست شيء اسمه مؤسسة الخدمات الإعلامية في لندن، أنا والأستاذ أمين السباعي اللي هو صحافي معروف وكبير طبعا. وبعدين بلشت شوي اشتغل كمان مع الإعلام الغربي. اشتغلت مع CNN واشتغلت شوي مع الBBC كمحللة يعني سياسية وهيك. وعملنا هالشيء اللي اسمه السنديكيشن اللي هو بينتشر بكل أنحاء العالم العربي، وهذا طبعا فتح أمامنا مجال كبير. وتخصصت أكثر شيء بحق المقابلات السياسية. بس شوي هلا جاي على بالي إنه نوع شوي واشتغل بقضايا المرأة إن شاء الله.
نعم. قبل ما نفوت أكثر يعني ونغوص بالإعلام يعني هل من صعوبات معينة، عراقيل اعترضت مسيرتك يعني تتوصلي لهالمراكز هاي؟
شوفي الحقيقة أنا بعتقد إنه ما في شيء بيجي هيك بسهولة. طبعا يعني بدك تضلك تشتغلي وتدرسي وتقري وتتعمقي بالمعلومات وبالأبحاث، لكن بتهيألي أنا كان عندي كتير شيء ساعدني، اللي هو صداقات وزملاء ساعدوني كتير. الأستاذ طلال سلمان، الأستاذ جون عبيد اللي هو هلا وزير، إيميلي نصر الله، الأستاذ أمين مثل ما قلت لك كمان. يعني كان في بحياتي دائما زملاء وصداقات دائما ساعدوني، دائما وقفوا حدي. وطبعا إذا الإنسان هو نفسه كمان مش مجتهد وما بيضل على اطلاع دائم وعلى اتصال دائم، بفتكر ما بينجح. دائما في عراقيل. يمكن ابرز العراقيل اول ما وصلنا على لندن واول ما وصلنا على بريطانيا ما كان عندنا فكره كيف نتعامل مع الاعلام الغربي ونتعامل مع اوساط القرار السياسي الغربي. بعدين اكتشفنا الواقع انه التعامل مع شيء مثل وزاره الخارجيه او مركز رئاسه الوزراء 10 داونينغ ستريت المعروف ب 10 داونينغ ستريت، او التعامل مع بروكسل، مع براسلز اللي هو مركز الاتحاد الاوروبي، لانه الصحافي الموجود باوروبا عنده شيء مهم، انه عنده بيكون اطلاع كمان وعنده قدره انه يعمل اتصالات كمان بكل باقي الدول الاوروبيه، وهذه الشغله كثير مهمه. هلا بفتكر بس تتعلمي وتعرفي كيف تتعاملي معهم بتحسي قديش هن هينين. وبعدين بعد حرب الغزو العراقي الشئم اللي غزو الكويت فيه، بفتكر صار برز دور جديد للإعلام